Hi there, Mark here again. Welcome to this, which is the first part of my build guide for the Kyosho Scorpion off-road racer. This is a beautiful buggy. I'm really looking forward to this because I've never built a Kyosho before, so it's going to be a little bit different to me. So let's find out what it's all about. So most of the parts in this kit are made of metal, aluminium or steel components, and there's a lot of adjusted and screwed together to do of all the little components. So I'm going to have to either do some of it off camera or speed it up a little bit just to stop you from getting bored along the way. But here we go. Let's start with step one, and we're going to open parts bag A. So this part is doing the front of the chassis. As you can see, I've already done the first bit, which is on this side, putting on the shock upright, the shock stay. And obviously it's going to be exactly the same for the other side, so I'll just show you putting this bit together. Okay, so you just need 2 cap screws, and notice the screws are different. You've got cap screws and you've got button head screws and you've got flat heads, so be careful which ones you get. Just check them with these diagrams. I think they are 2 size. So you've got the 2.6 by 8 and a 2.6 by 16, and you need this plastic part here, and you've got to note that there's a little notch, you know, if you can see at the front, and that goes to the front. Okay, so take the longer cap screw, put that through the back, then put your plastic spacer on, remembering to get that notch at the front. Push that through your chassis rail, and then screw that into this central bar, which is an SC237. And then take your smaller cap screw and just thread that into the actual chassis rail itself. So there is the thread inside the rail for that screw. And to finish this off, you just need this cap screw, which is the rounded head that goes through the top of the damper stay or shock tower, and then you simply secure that with a 3mm nut. And it should look something like this at the end of step 1. So step 2 is the servo saver, and this is quite fiddly to do, so I've done this off camera. You think you need like 3 pairs of hands to do this. It's quite tricky, you know, but overall it's not really that complicated. So basically what you need to do is get your plastic parts. So you've got the numbers here, SC226B6, and this part here, 226, part number 5, and simply you've got the number on the parts tray, which shows you the 226 bit there, and then obviously the part number, which is in black there, number 6 and number 5. So once you've got those, you've got the small threaded ball joint that goes onto the arm here, and you just put in the cap screw from underneath, the 8mm cap screw. That's quite simple, just screw that on. Hopefully that's in focus, and it's through the second hole from the inside. Putting these ball joints in is a bit more difficult. You can probably see there's a ball joint, then there's a nut, and then there's a nut on the bottom as well. And if you look carefully at the diagram there, I missed this the first time, it shows 0mm, and I think what that means is you need none of the thread sticking out. Should be 0 of that thread sticking out through those bottom nuts. So basically put the nut on, screw the ball joint through, and then screw the bottom nut until it's flush, and then what you need to do is get the supplied spanner and tighten the top nut there down onto the bottom nut, if you see what I mean. You need to get those quite nice and nipped up. We don't want them falling out. So yeah, make sure that you get the bottom flush, and that's the end of step 2. Step 3 is the servo saver again, so it's finishing that off. So this time you need this kind of chrome tube. You need the spring, push that over. Got to insert that in there. It's quite tight with that spring. Note the orientation. So it needs to go like so. Push that down, and then you've got to get the circlip on the top. Yeah, so that's like that, and you can really feel then when you try and turn it, there's quite a lot of pressure there. So yeah, that's the servo saver finished. Step 4 is mounting the servo saver. So you need this aluminium bracket. You need to push this large 35mm cap screw through the middle there, and then put on the plain nut. Make sure you give that a good nip up. Place your servo saver over that, and then you've got a nylock nut that goes and holds that on the top. And again, we've got a little note that we need to copy here. So it's showing to do it all the way up, and then to turn it back a quarter of a turn, and then just check that moves freely, which it does. Step 5, you want to open parts bag B. This is the main chassis, and there's quite a bit going on in this step. Right, so I'm going to do this bit first. So I'm going to get my servo saver, and that's going to go on the front here, and it's going through the first 2 holes, not through that end one there, with the 4 15mm countersunk screws. You've got this little bracket, and you've got to insert this bar, which I think is the front axle. So right, this is tricky. We've got to get this the right way around. Okay, so I just had a problem. I've just gone away and come back again. I think I've got a solution. It's quite tricky, this, I must say, so you have to pay really careful attention to what the diagrams are actually showing here. And if you don't get it exactly lined up like it shows, you're going to get it all wrong, as I've just found out. So right, here we go. These aluminium brackets, I couldn't get them to sit over the bar where the, I don't know if you can see in this light, there's like a knurled section where the brackets have to go, and that knurled section is standing proud, and it wouldn't let these brackets sit down over the bar. Well, not at that point though. It would in the middle, but not where those knurled sections are. So I've had to just slightly, I've got a little file, and I've just taken a little bit out of the front and the back of each of these slots, not the top, but the front and the back, and I've managed to get them so they're a real tight fit. But I've clicked them on, and you might be able to see in this light again, I know it's going to be difficult, the markings on the bar are there, and there's one tiny little mark there, so you can get these lined up, and the centre of the 3 marks on this bar have got to line up with the tiny little notch that's on that aluminium bracket. So anyway, I think that's quite right now. That's how it should be. So hopefully this will go on now. And again, we've got to make sure, if you look at the diagram here, the 3 notches are on the right hand side, and the bar is bending forwards or upwards. So I think that needs to sit like so, with the bend towards the front. Anyway, that's what it looks like. So let's have another go at getting this bracket on. See if I can get those countersunk screws done up. And what I recommend doing is just adding tension slightly to the one screw and then swapping to the other. Don't tighten one fully up, because obviously that aluminium part is pulling down on the bar. We want to get that kind of even pressure on both screws. So just alternate between the 2, and you might be able to see you can't screw this down flat onto the chassis rail. There's going to be a tiny gap between that aluminium bracket and the chassis rail, because the bar, the diameter in that is bigger than the hole. So yeah, don't try and clamp it so there's no gap. You won't be able to do that. So I'll just get the other side done the same, and then hopefully we can get those 2 plates on at the back. Yeah, and these don't line up exactly, so you have to do a bit of wrestling to get the aluminium in the right position to get the screws in the holes, but it does go in the end. I've got to say, this is a very different RC building experience for me compared to a plastic kit, but I really am enjoying it at the same time, so all good. Okay, so I think that's how we should be looking. Told those 2 rear plates, it's just the 2 12mm countersunk screws from the bottom, and by the look of this, got to make sure that these are pointing down, so that curve there and these 2 points need to be curving down. Okay, so yeah, these are pointed down. We're starting to make progress now. It's looking a bit like a chassis. On to step number 6. Step 6 is the diff gear, and in this part we're going to have to get the gearbox, which is pre-assembled, and you're going to have to get the actual diff itself. And you've got this cover here. It's a cast aluminium cover. You've got your the larger bearings, and this plastic part, which is from SC221. So the instructions go on about hit with the driver lightly to make bearing matched. I think that means to get it inside the housing there. It looks like it's going to be a tight fit. I've noticed, just a quick try on the diff, that on the light side it slips on quite easily, but on the darker side it really doesn't want to go down, so you're going to have to use some force here. What you want to do though is make sure that you get the bearing square before we start pushing it down, because if this goes at an angle, it's going to dig in and get caught, and you could end up damaging the bearing trying to get it off again. So yeah, let's try and get these on. I'll let you know how I get on. Okay, so that went quite easily straight into that, didn't need to hit it or anything, so it's just this one that's going to be a problem. I'm going to try and use the carrier and add a bit of force to pull that down and get it seated. Yep, there was a definite click there, so that's gone all the way in. Happy about that. So now we can get this in place. It says put some grease on these gears. So the light side goes in first, and then we get the cover, and that's got 3 8mm cap screws holding that in. And to hold on the plastic part, you've got the 2 button screws, 8mm. And it should look like this at the end of that step. Step 7 is the rear shock stay. Well, before we do that, we're going to put this metal cover on the top there with 2 of your cap screws, button screws, 8mm, and then the stay itself goes onto these 3 holes on the gearbox there. So again, it's those 8mm cap screws. I keep calling them cap screws, they're button screws. So once you've done that, it should look like this, those 3 screws there and the 2 in the cap. And to finish this step, what we need to do is get the 15mm long screws, put them through. Need a bit of help with the screwdriver, even though there's not a thread in there. And simply hold those in place with 2 of your 3mm standard nuts. And that's the end of step 7. Step 8 is fitting the motor. So the first thing you need to do is take the R-clip out here and remove this plastic cover. So the gears it shows here are already pre-fitted. I just need to put a bit of grease on those. And then I've got my motor to take this gear off to get the screws in. Then it's simply 2 of the countersunk screws, like so. Put that gear back on. Put your grub screw in the pinion. This is supplied, by the way, the pinion, with the kit. Like it shows in the diagram, just make sure these gears are lined up before you nip up that grub screw. So all we need to do now is get some grease on these gears and slip the cover back on. Step 9, time to open parts bag C, for which you'll need from it these 4 12mm long cap screws, and you need 3 plastic parts. Easily find these in the bag. Basically, I've already put the one on there. You just basically insert that like that and simply screw in your 12mm screw, and as it shows, because you're screwing into plastic, don't go mad over tightening this part. And it's simply a case of you've got a screw in the shock tower there and there, roll cage that you've just made, and we're just going to secure it with those 2 screws. You just get those 2 done up, and it's on step 10, which is attaching that gearbox assembly to the rear of the chassis. You're going to need 5 of these countersunk 3B8mm screws and the 2 little black lock nuts. They're nylock nuts, and they're going to go in the plastic part. So basically you're going to line this up. I want to get these 3 into the actual gearbox aluminium housing itself first. And once those 3 are in place, you can get one of those nylock nuts, try and get it into the top of the plastic rail. So those holes those nuts go into are kind of hex shaped, so they're captive, so you don't need a spanner to hold those. Just insert the 2 8mm screws and tighten them up. Step 11 is the front and rear shocks. They come kind of pre-assembled like this, but you need to take them apart because we've got to get some oil in them. Just take the bottom clip off and your spring, and then just unscrew and get the piston out. Now you'll get a little bag, and inside, I don't know if you can see in the shadow there are 4 little gaskets. I don't know if you can see them there in the reflection, but yeah, they are there. I think they're made of polycarbonate or something like that. They're tiny little things, and you've just got to put 1 on each shock. Put it over the piston, and then you've got to get it over the threaded part, and it's got to sit right at the bottom of this collar. And I think it's a seal, obviously, but I've got to say, guys, this is one tricky little so-and-so to get down. It really is. Luckily, it's made of pretty tough material, so I managed to force it down a little bit, and then get my bradawl and very carefully just tease it down the threads. It doesn't want to go, I tell you, but yeah, bit of perseverance and you'll get it down there. Just be really careful, because obviously you don't get a spare, I don't think. You don't want to lose one of these or break it, obviously. Okay, so I don't know if we're focusing on this, but trust me, it is on there, right at the bottom there. So yeah, you've got to do that with all 4 shocks. So once you've done that, get your body and fill it up with shock oil. This is provided in the kit as well. And as it shows here, it shows all coming out, and I've done one already, and I'll tell you what, it does come out. So yeah, be careful, nice and steady, and you'll need some cloth. Just pop that in really slowly, and obviously you need to try and get all the air bubbles out. You might want to leave the shock upside down for some time to let the bubbles come to the surface. So just tighten that up. Yeah, what a mess of oil everywhere. But I think, yeah, the more that comes out obviously shows you've got it filled right up. So then you just need the tools provided. You hold your top eye, or the top hole with that part, your spanner, and yeah, just tighten that up, and that's how you do the shocks. Just put it back together, and yeah, make 4 of. Just one little note as well, just to check the front shocks. It shows that the collar, the red collar there, is right at the top of the shock body itself, 0mm, and the rear shock needs to be 3mm down. Now you can use a ruler, but I find one of these digital calipers is really useful. I think this is only about 5 or 6 quid. So yeah, you can get that set nice and accurately to your 3mm, 3.01, I think that'll do. And yeah, you can just check then that you've got the right distance for that collar. And this will also come in useful later on, as you'll see, where we've got to measure down to a couple of 3mm now and again. So yeah, bit of a tip, if you can get one of these, like I say, nice and cheap, get them off the internet, and job's a good one. Step 12 is making up the rear suspension arms. I've already done the one. It should end up looking like this. So you've got your wheel shaft in, you've got a ball connector on, and that's all we need to put on. So that's the one. I'll show you the other one. So you've got to screw in your ball connector. Make sure you put on that 3mm nut first, and that's got to be, as it shows here, 8mm away from the actual suspension arm itself. So just get that set. Yep, that's about 8mm. So I can get the nut tightened up onto the aluminium piece. Simply get your bearings, match them up with the diagrams, make sure you've got the right size. Just pop those, one in each side. Your axle, pop that through. Then you need this aluminium part. It goes on this way around, and secure that with this strange grub screw, and that goes through the actual axle itself as well. Simple as that. Make 2 of those. Right then, steps 13 and 14 is putting the rear suspension posts on and the rear swing shafts on, or the rear swing arms. Why did I laugh at the beginning of that? Well, I've just done this one off camera. I'm glad I did, because I made a silly little mistake and wondered why when I put it all together the arm was locked, it just wouldn't move up and down. And yeah, it's all to do with this here. You've got to pay super special careful attention to this diagram. It's not that obvious at first, but it's to do with the 2 posts. You've got a long and a short, as you can see, and there's a kind of taper. Each one's got a taper on it. I put both tapers pointing the same direction at first, and that's what locked it up. So basically, look at for the outer one, which is the longer one, you screw that on with an 8mm countersunk, so a short one goes in this outer hole, and you just loosely screw that on for now. Note, with the taper at the top, put your longer 15mm screw through that hole, and again lightly screw on the other post, the short post, but this time that taper has got to be pointing down, else believe me your suspension won't move up and down. You need to do then is get your stainless shaft, and this will only go one way because the holes are drilled through at an angle. Okay, once you've got the bar in place, just to hold the holes in line, you can nip up the bottom screws that you just put in lightly before. Okay, so once you've got those lined up, take the shaft back out, and then it's on to step 14, the swing arm or the swing shaft. Get your dog bone, don't forget to put that in, else it won't go in later. Although I must admit it will fall out again. If you flip this right over, the drive shaft will fall out. But yeah, let's just show you getting this one in. So reinsert that pin, the shaft. Okay, so that's in and moving freely. Then you've got your tiny grub screw again. There's 2 of these, and one goes in top of each of the posts to obviously stop that shaft coming out, so that swing shaft doesn't come out. Okay, so once you've done that, just go around and check you've got all your screws tightened up, and I think we should be safe with the rear swing arms done. Step 15 is fitting the rear shocks. Probably one of the most simplest steps so far. You just need the red spacer, and you've got a little black nylock nut. So that spacer goes over there, and then pop your shock on the bottom, feed it onto that top red spacer or whatever you want to call it, and then fit on your lock nut, and obviously don't over tighten it, because the lock nut will do its job and stop it from coming off. So there we go, we've got working rear suspension. Well, marvellous. I'm really enjoying this Kyosho build, I must admit. Okay, then it's come together now, I think. Really seems like we've made some progress. It's nice to have that rear suspension on and working, so you can see there's a lot of travel there. I must say it does move really smoothly and freely, so yeah, I'm really pleased with it so far, and I'm looking forward to this getting finished and on all 4 wheels. But I think this part of the build guide's gone on a bit long, so I'm going to call it to a close now. I hope you've enjoyed it, and hopefully you'll join me on the next one where we'll get this on its wheels. Thanks again. Bye.